So this channel is generally targeted towards other developers who they've been making games for a while. They've been doing it for perhaps many years. They've released a handful of games. Maybe they've made a couple $1,000. They've tried doing some marketing. They've done some stuff, and they've passed through the first handful of, I would call like filters, the handful of big filters that most developers never get past. That's kind of the main target audience of this channel. I don't really talk about beginner advice and things like that, and like, oh, top 5 ways to get started in game development in 2025. I don't really do that kind of stuff very much. But oftentimes I still do get comments from people who are not game developers. There are a lot of people watching this channel who have never made a game before, who are considering getting into game development and stuff like that. And so I decided, you know what, for a change, I actually am going to make a video for the beginners. But this is not going to basically, here's the deal. I'm going to tell you everything that you don't want to hear. This is not basically I woke up this morning and decided, you know what? I want to crush somebody's dreams. So you know, unlike most of the channels that you're going to see, oh, top 25 ways, top 10 ways to how to start game development in 2025, how to blah blah blah. I don't care. I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear, but I'm going to tell you some stuff that I don't know. Hey, hopefully, maybe you'll take it a little bit seriously. If not, whatever. I don't know. I'm just going to talk, and I think this is just it's a perspective that you're probably not going to hear very much in this whole like game development YouTube space. So I'm just going to share this. The basically the first and best tip that I have for anybody that's considering starting making games and indie games is to not start making indie games. If you're Here's the deal. If you are looking for some dumbass YouTuber like myself to tell you, you can make a game, you got this, buddy, then you've already failed. If you need somebody to tell you, your game's going to be great, you can do it, you've got this, you're already on the wrong track. When you sign up to start trying to make games, you're signing up for, at minimum, if you're like a 300 IQ, like super skilled person who's maybe already been in like similar industries like film or something like that, animation, you're maybe signing up for a minimum of like 5 years of nobody caring about what you're doing, and basically you're not going to get any of that positive affirmation when you're releasing your first crappy games, because you will. So if you're looking for somebody to tell you, you got this, you might get started for a week and then you're going to quit. Basically, if you actually genuinely want to make games enough that you might have a chance of doing it long enough to become successful, you will have already started. You will be watching this on your second monitor, and on your first monitor you got Unity or Unreal open, programming away, working on the game project, because you actually want to be doing it. If you actually want to do this, you're already doing this. You don't need somebody to tell you to start. That's the first thing. Game development, it's kind of I call it it's like a rock star job, where it's one of these things, really basically just anything in the entertainment industry is kind of falling into this like rock star category, where it's something that it sounds really cool, it seems really neat, it seems like something that's like really flashy, because on the outside, right, it's entertainment. It's designed to be flashy and cool and entertaining and fun. But the inner workings of all of entertainment is not like that. The inner workings are it's a job. It's just a job. Yes, there's maybe a little bit more creativity at times than, filling out spreadsheets in Excel all day, but it's still a job. You're sitting at a desk, you're writing code, you're doing all this stuff. And in game development, especially, there's so many different tasks that there's such a low chance that you're actually going to enjoy all of them. If you want to make commercially successful games, you pretty much need to do a significant amount of stuff that you're going to hate doing. No matter like how much you might love the art or creative side, you're going to have to do play testing. You're going to have to listen to feedback. You're going to have to do marketing, all these different things that you probably don't want to do. So it's kind of this rock star job where millions of people look up to it and they think, wow, this is really cool. This would be really fun. But so few people actually make it through. There's this whole thing where it's like anybody can start making games. You're going to hear that a lot. And while technically true, yes, anybody can also become a guitarist. Anybody can buy a guitar, watch some tutorials on YouTube, and learn how to play a couple songs. Not everybody is going to become a rock star. That's not how it works. Millions and millions of people get in the door, and only like a few hundred actually really make it. Anyone can start. The production of games is I mean, it's very accessible, right? If you have a computer, basically any computer from like the past 10 years, you can probably run some kind of game engine. Maybe you're not going to run Unreal Engine on your Windows XP, Windows 98 or whatever. But, you could probably get Game Maker or something and start making some kind of games. But to do it at a commercial level is a whole different thing. It is a completely different beast. Main thing being that if you want to be a game developer, there's just so much stuff to learn. And it's not just that there's a lot of stuff, like it's a lot of stuff all in vastly different fields. Okay, you've got tons of analytical stuff, regarding the programming and design and things like that. And then you've got a bunch of creative stuff where it's like, the visuals and the characters and the emotional side if you're telling stories or if you're, designing trailers, and it's like the marketing and then the business. And then there is so much stuff if you're working with other people, managing a team. That's a whole thing. There is so much stuff in completely different fields. And I genuinely, I don't know if everybody is wired in the way where they can actually learn all those different skills and do them all at a competent level. I genuinely don't know if that's actually a thing that everybody's capable of. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. I don't know. But regardless, because there's so much stuff to learn, it's like, yes, you might be able to download Unity and make a basic maze game in your first week of game development. Fully creating and releasing an entire game, you do not realize how much is involved. Everybody who's on the outside looking in, thinking, "Oh, game development seems kind of cool. Oh yeah, I watched a couple devlogs. They were really interesting." Hey, spoiler alert! Actually, on the devlogs, we make it look easy. I intentionally cut out the bro. Like when I make a devlog, I'll have like 3 months of development compressed into a 10-minute video. Why is that? Well, because in the past 3 months of work, about 10 minutes of it was interesting. That's why devlog channels die, because most of the process is just so dull, and there's just so much random dull stuff. Like, oh yeah, I just spent the past week resizing textures. Whoop-de-doo. Boy oh boy. So much fun. Because of this, it's like, let's say you've got a person who's like, oh, I want to start making games. The first thing you have to realize is that you are signing up for a massive amount of prerequisites. There is a massive amount of stuff that you need to learn just to get to the point where you're capable of making an entire game. You're signing up for probably easily, I would say, 3 years of time. 3 years of putting in probably at least I'd say 10 hours a week. At least 10 hours a week. 3 years. At that point, you might be competent enough to make a decent game that could get decent reviews. Some people may be a little bit quicker. A lot of people take much, much longer. There are so many people who, because again, there are so many different skill sets that are required in completely different fields, creative, analytical, marketing, that there are a lot of developers who spend 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And you look at their stuff, and it's like, it still does not look competent. It still doesn't look good. It still doesn't look fun. It still doesn't look engaging at all. Because again, there's so much stuff. And if you're not putting in a ton of time consistently to learn all the different fields, it's going to take you forever. So you're signing up for at least a few years of just prerequisites. And then after you've got the prerequisites down, right, after you have the basics kind of figured out, then you're looking at, it's going to take you at least a year to develop a decent game. Yes, you can make smaller stuff, but especially when you're starting out, you don't know how to scope correctly. A lot of people talk about scope creep and start small and blah, 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 and all this stuff. It is impossible to accurately scope a game if you have never made a game before. You have no reference point. You do not know what you're capable of. So people say start small, and everybody thinks that they're starting small. Everybody thinks that they're working within their abilities. But you don't know what your abilities are. So naturally, you're going to overscope and you're going to try and do stuff that's unrealistic. That's just part of it. So maybe you go a year into a project and you realize, oh, wait, I thought this was going to be done in 6 months. I still have like probably 4 years of development left. Maybe you have to scrap that. And now you've lost an entire year of time, right? Sure, you've learned from it, which is great. But, now we're like even more years into the process. And then you got to make another game. And now it's like, okay, once you get through the whole process once, it's like, okay, odds that your first game is going to be even moderately decent are really low because you don't know what player expectations look like. You don't know what Steam reviews are going to be like. You don't know what people are going to complain about. You're going to see people complaining about all kinds of weird things that you would never have expected to be issues that are going to tank your review score and kill any chance of your game making a decent amount of money. So then it's like, okay, so now you've got your first game out of the way. You've got your prerequisites out of the way. You're now like, I don't know, maybe 5 to 7 years in. And now maybe you try, again, if you're still making games at this point, if you haven't given up, most people have already given up by this point. So if you keep going beyond there, now you got to make another whole game, which means you're signing up for another year, 2, 3 years, or however long it might take of developing that. Again, we're also not even talking about putting money into those games, right? Obviously, I think you should try and keep your budgets as close to zero as possible until you're making more than $0. So like if you're making money off your game, sure, maybe put some money in. But a lot of people, they start throwing money into their projects and then they start like selling their house and liquidating their retirement before they've even published a single game. I can make a whole video on that. Guys, don't put money into your games unless you're making money off of games. Because if you don't have a track record of making money, why do you think you're going to suddenly start making money when you start selling your house? Like, no, stop. What are you doing? Okay, so now you got your second game, and it comes out. It's a complete toss-up if that's going to make any money. I don't know. Maybe you've tried doing a little bit of marketing. I mean, again, most people release 5, 10, 20 games before they actually start making money. In my case, I think I kind of lost count, and there's some games where it's like, does that count as a game or not? Like some Game Jam stuff. It's somewhere around like 8 games before I made like any money. And that's like 9 years. And keep in mind, I'm on the fast end. I got a little bit lucky. I'm lucky that I started making games when I was as young as I was. I started making games when I was 12. If I did not have all that time, that low stress time to kind of play around with it and get the hang of it, I would not be where I am now. If I started when I was even 16, 17, that still would have been like too late. I'd still be trying to get a grasp on things because I would have graduated from high school. I would have had to get other jobs. I would have had to be supporting myself in other ways. Because I started so young, I was living with my parents. I wasn't like, oh no, how am I going to pay my mortgage? How am I going to feed my kids? I was 12. I didn't have kids. So if you're starting this later in your life, also when you've got more responsibilities, I hate to say it, you're in a tough spot. You are genuinely in a really tough spot. Most of the really successful developers that I know are very young. Like they're in their early 20s and they started making games when they were 10, 12, 14, and they've just been obsessed with it. And they've been living and breathing game development for like their entire, like for like half their life. You know, their brain has been maturing as they've been learning to make games. And so they just turn into like these game development machines. And like those are the people that I know that are making the most money and that have the best strategies and that are going viral and that are making like, you know, hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars. It's all these young folks that are in similar situations to myself. So, you know, I mean, if you're watching this and you're young, if you're like 10 or 11 or 12 or whatever, this really is the best time to start making games. The younger you are, the better a time it is to start making games. The older you are, the more responsibility you have. You're stacking on many, many, many more levels of complexity that and risk that I don't know how you would deal with that. I don't know because I'm not in that position. I was lucky to be in the position that I was in when I started. Yeah, so let's see. So we're looking at, you know, multiple years of prerequisites, multiple years to develop multiple games, and then let's say 10 years down the line, maybe you're starting to kind of get the hang of it a little bit. Most people still aren't. Again, most developers who do stick with it, they're going to stick with it for 10, 15, 20 years. There are people who have been doing this stuff for a very long time and still haven't made more than $1,000 off of their entire catalog. I don't think people realize how common that is. There's just so many different factors involved that you cannot foresee. So many things that you will not expect. There's nobody that's going to teach you everything that you need to know. If you're just going to go on YouTube and try and learn everything that you possibly can from YouTube, even me, I'm not going to teach you everything. I'm just not. There's stuff that I either still want to, you know, keep to myself. Like, bro, there's strategies that I'm not sharing with you. There are. Not everybody's going to teach you everything. And a lot of the people that are teaching stuff are not super skilled. Eventually, you have to start. You're going to get to the point where you have problems that nobody else can solve, and you have to figure stuff out yourself. Kind of going back to the stuff at the start, if you need a YouTuber to tell you, you got this, buddy, you're not going to get very far because they just want you to subscribe to their channel. I don't really care if you subscribe to this channel. You could unsubscribe if you want. I really don't mind. I'm just saying this for the handful of people that might find it useful. You know, if you like the idea of making games for, okay, like let's give a couple of different scenarios. Let's say you've never made a game before and you're watching this and you're like, maybe I could make money off of games. You can't. If that's the goal, give up. There are so many easier ways to make money. I guarantee you. I've made money in multiple different ways, a couple different ways besides game development. YouTube. Go become a YouTuber. It is 10 times easier to become an influencer than it is to become a game developer. I started making money off of YouTube like after a couple of years. After like 3 years. It took me 9 years of making games. Okay. Start selling courses. It is way easier to make money selling courses on how to make games than it is to actually make money off of games. That's how I first started making like decent money, is off of Udemy courses. That's another tip. I could make a whole video on this, but stop making YouTube tutorials. Stop making YouTube tutorials on game development topics because the ad rates are awful, and you're only ever going to get a couple of thousand views per video. All those channels that are making Unity tutorials, none of them are making more than a couple dollars per video. Just make slightly longer courses. Make like a 2-hour beginner course, put it on Udemy, and I guarantee you will make 30 times as much money. Anyways, if the goal is money, There are a million easier ways to do it. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, game development, it's weird, man. I don't know any successful developers, any developers who are like really doing well financially that don't hate making games, or that at the very least hate the game that they're currently working on by the time they finish it. Pretty much no matter who you're talking to, if you've made a really successful game, if they're being honest, there are a handful of people who will lie and say that they love making their game. Actually, I did this. Here's how I know that this is a thing. Is because I did it. When I was working on Choo Choo Charles, this is for PR purposes. People are more likely to like a product if they believe that the creator of the product likes the product. Now, I have nothing against Choo Choo Charles. I think Choo Choo Charles is a fine game. I think it's decent enough. It's definitely got its issues. It's got plenty of issues. But I hated working on it for probably the last 6 months of development. Absolutely hated it. Despised it. At some point, I'll probably talk about the more real side of development there, the less glamorized version. But if you just say, boy, guys, I love waking up every morning and working on my game, it's better for sales. It genuinely is. People, they want you to love what you're doing. They want you to be happy about it. And if you're not, then it reflects poorly on the product. So I would say, oh man, guys, I've been having so much fun working on this game. I wasn't. I really wasn't. But yeah, so again, it's one of these things where if you've been doing this long enough and you're making successful games, you have to do a lot of stuff that you don't enjoy. You have to make a lot of personal creative compromises to make something that's marketable. And so if that's the goal, like, you're probably not going to have a good time. So then there's the option of like make games as a hobby. If you want to make games as a hobby, absolutely go for it. That's one thing that I don't want people to think that I'm like, oh, nobody should make games ever at all. Like, well, no, if you just want to make games, like, sure, go for it, do whatever. Ultimately, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't really care what you do with anything. But if you're trying to do it commercially and you really want to make money off of this, I guess the creative fulfillment thing, sure, go for it. But if it's like, I want this job because it's creatively fulfilling and I also want to make a lot of money, yeah, buckle your seatbelt. And then there's the other whole aspect where it's like, on this channel we talk a lot about the aspects of the development process and the marketing process that you do have control over, because there's a lot. There's people attribute way too much stuff to luck and random chance, when in reality you have control over a lot of different variables that you can use to put the odds way more in your favor. But that still doesn't change the fact that there are a lot of things that are out of your control. When you release your games, the planets may not be aligned and it might still flop. There are games where if they released 3 years ago, they'd probably make millions of dollars. But you release them today, maybe they make 50 or 100 grand. Like, there is a big difference, when it comes to the timing and like where the market is moving and where player interest is moving. It's all variable and you don't really have control over it. So, even if you are getting to the point where you're making competent games, you're decent at what you're doing, you might just be releasing at a time that just isn't great. And then you might need to go through the development process multiple times, multiple more games before you put yourself in a position where everything really is in your favor. Main reason that I'm making this video is because I see it online, people in my comments, and I see it in my life as well. People who I know, or people who I don't know very well, who know that I make games. And they're like, oh yeah, I hear that you make games. Yeah, that seems pretty cool. I think I was thinking I might try making games, and maybe I don't know, maybe you could give me a couple tips or something. It's like, people don't realize. They just don't know. People just don't know. You don't know what you're getting into. You don't know what the process is like. You don't know how much you're going to dislike it. If you're actually trying to do it commercially. Again, if you're just doing this as a hobby, go for it. Do whatever. It's fun when you don't care about money. It really is. I had a lot of fun making games when I was 12, 13. And that's why I kept on doing it, right? Is because I did like it at the time. And I set these goals for myself way back then where I was like, okay, I want to be one of the best game developers and I want to make money off of my games. And so those goals kept me going because I was like, these are the goals that I set. And I don't know why that's what I just decided, but I decided that, and it was so deeply ingrained that I had to do it. But now that I'm getting to the point where I've kind of done it, it's like there's not even that much point. It's like now that the goal isn't pushing me that much anymore. It's like, oh wow, this is really pretty dull. So it's like it's just, I've talked about this a little bit before, but like Cuff Bust is gonna be my last like major commercial game. I really don't see any reason why I would go through this whole process again. It's a pain. It's a pain. Even as much money as I'm making, it's still really not worth it. It's not worth it. I mean, hey, maybe I'm taking it for granted. Maybe I'll come back 3, 4, 5 years later, but I don't know, man. Some folks will watch this and just be like, "Oh, bro, just take a break. You're just burnt out a little bit." I've been burnt out for the past 8 years, so I'm this is just how it goes. And also, I should say, this genuinely is not. This is not just me projecting. I have a feeling that's a word I'm going to hear a lot in the comments. It's not like this is just a me thing. This is I'm bringing a general observation of the entire industry and of all the successful game developers that I know. I'm bringing it to you because most developers if you're new to this, you don't know successful game developers. You're not friends with them. You haven't talked with them. You don't know what it's like behind the scenes. You just see the people making a bunch of money, and you're like, "Wow, that's so cool." So I'm bringing you these conversations and this sentiment that you don't have access to until you get to this kind of point. Pretty much all of us thought that game development was something different. We all thought that it was going to be fun. We all thought that it was going to be a lot easier. We all thought that we were a lot more capable than we were. We were all really confident in ourselves. We were all... we all had very different expectations of what this industry would be like. We all thought that we were going to make our dream game. None of us, nobody that's really successful is, well, most people. Again, I should also talk about the whole shooting blind thing, but you get to a point where you have to make something commercial. You're making creative compromises that you didn't think you'd have to, because that's what you have to do if you want to make money. So now I'll talk about the shooting blind thing real quick. Anybody in the world could walk into a shooting range with a gun, put on a blindfold, spin around 5 times, shoot in a direction, and maybe they'll hit a bullseye. Maybe they'll hit the target. That's possible. Same thing with game development. Anybody who knows how to pull the trigger, anybody who knows how to package a game and upload it to Steam could maybe possibly land a hit. But what are the odds, right? At that point, you really are putting it down to random chance. If you want to have even a moderately consistent career, or if you want to increase your chances of success beyond the 30 years, 20 years, 15 years of just trying to shoot in random directions, hoping you hit something, you got to take off the blindfold. You got to work on your stance. You got to practice. You got to aim. There's a lot more stuff that you have to take into account. And that's all the stuff that nobody thinks about when they're first starting this. A lot of people think that game development is making games. They're like, "Oh yeah, you just make a game." No, you don't just make a game. Anybody can get lucky. And honestly, most of the developers who are successful, they did just shoot blind. They shot blind. They didn't really know what they were making. I've talked with a lot of these people that have made successful games, and they cannot genuinely tell you why they made X number of dollars. They don't know why their game really has appeal. They're like, I mean, it's fun. People like it, I guess, and it went viral a little bit. Most people don't actually know. They can't actually explain it to you. Think about like the turnover rates also. It's like if let's say you wanted to get into AAA, the turnover rates. I think the average is like 5 years or something. Is that right? Let me see if I can look this up and verify that. But it's very, very quick. Most people leave the game industry. People get overworked, underpaid, and again, because it's one of these rock star jobs, everybody wants to do it. There's a lot of people available to get into the workforce. There are more people that want to get into the workforce than are actually needed. So you're getting underpaid because you can be replaced so easily. Yeah, I don't know. It's something I've been thinking about a bit lately. Just because of, people coming to me being like, oh yeah, I think I want to make games. I've never made a game before. I haven't Googled how to make a game 101. I haven't read any WikiHow articles yet. But I'm going to come to you and ask for a shortcut. Doesn't exist. Sorry. You're signing up for a decade of nobody caring, of everybody hating your games, stumbling around in the dark, having to relearn everything that you thought that you knew about video games. As a gamer, like if you've been playing games for a long time, there's going to be all this stuff that you think you know. You think you know a lot about game design. Oh yeah, I watched a Game Maker's Toolkit video, and I also watched a couple devlogs, and I think I'm pretty good at game design. I think I'd be a good game designer. You wouldn't be. Okay, you genuinely you do not know what you're getting into. None of the knowledge that you have as a consumer is going to translate into the production side or the marketing side or the anything side other than being a consumer. You're great at consuming games. Good for you. That's all that you're good at right now. That knowledge does not translate. This is just basically TLDR. If you need somebody to tell you to make a game, you're probably not going to get far enough to actually continue making games. If you want to make games as a hobby, go for it. Do your thing. Have fun. If you want to make games as a full-time living, I don't know what to tell you. All I need to tell you is that it's not what you think it is. That's it. It's way more than you could imagine, and you're probably going to quit, like everybody else. If you hear this message and you say, man, screw this guy, I'm going to do it anyways. That's the right attitude. If that's what you're thinking, then you might be on the right track. Then you might be hitting me up in, 4 or 5 years saying, hey, guess what? I just made a successful game. I watched your video and it motivated. If this motivates you, hey, great. But if you are even a little bit discouraged by this, just take a little time to think about it. There are easier ways to make money. There are easier ways to find a job that you enjoy. Yeah, that's I don't know. That's it.